The ousted Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro was transported from a federal courthouse in New York City on Monday after pleading not guilty to charges of narco-terrorism. Maduro and his wife were believed to be in an armored vehicle that was seen leaving the courthouse grounds and expected to return to a Brooklyn detention center where the couple is being held. Maduro, aged 63, pleaded not guilty in New York, in the New York federal court to 4 criminal counts that include narco-terrorism, cocaine importation conspiracy and possession of machine guns and destructive devices. Maduro's wife, Cilia Flores, also pleaded not guilty. The next court date was set for the 17th of March. Dozens of protesters, both pro and anti-Maduro, gathered outside the courthouse before the half-hour hearing. Maduro is accused of overseeing a cocaine trafficking network that partnered with violent groups, including Mexico's Sinaloa and Zetas cartels, the Colombian FARC rebels, and Venezuela's Tren de Aragua gang. Maduro has long denied the allegations, saying they were a mask for imperialist designs on Venezuela's rich oil reserves. Our SABC News correspondent, Sherwin Brass-Peace, is standing by to give us an update. Sherwin, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us and a warm welcome. First of all, Sherwin, we see that both Maduro and his wife pleaded not guilty. So what does that plea trigger procedurally? And what should we expect between now and the next court date in March?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What does it trigger? What it tells us is that we're underway here, that there is a court proceeding now that will determine the guilt or innocence of Nicolas Maduro and his co-accused Cilia Flores, the First Lady or former First Lady of Venezuela. We now understand that he has defense representation, and certainly from inside of that courtroom, Barry Pollock, one of his defense attorneys, said that he intends to file motions concerning Maduro's role as a head of a sovereign state, Simpiwe, and questions about the legality of the military abduction. They are framing this as a military abduction. He will also raise issues in relation to Maduro's health, his health problems that would require attention. So this is now a process that it unfolds and continues to unfold before a judge, and one expects at the very least for there to be a free and fair trial here, and a number of motions that may include dismissal of these charges, questions about the jurisdiction that the United States enjoys or does not enjoy, particularly given the fact that it crossed borders here, that there are questions around the violations of the sovereignty of Venezuela and the United Nations Charter that is unequivocal about the equal sovereignty of its member states. So lots of questions here. We've had the not guilty pleas. I'll quote you a little bit more about what Maduro said. He said, "I'm innocent, I am not guilty, I am a decent man, I am still the president of my country, I am a prisoner of war." We understand that as things played out inside the courtroom behind me, Maduro tried to make some sort of statement. He was interrupted by the judge, who told him that there would be time for that, obviously pointing to the fact that there will be an opportunity for the defense to present its case. But essentially what it means is that we're underway here, that Maduro will not be released on bail immediately. In fact, his defense attorney indicated that they would not be applying for that today, probably taking their time to understand the very lengthy indictment that has been imposed here by the Department of Justice, and really trying to forge a pathway ahead here in terms of their defense. And one imagines that there will be a vigorous defense given the stakes here, that a sitting head of state removed against his will from his country, brought to the United States, one imagines that they will put up a very fierce defense moving forward.
And absolutely, Sherwin. I mean, the fact that he has long argued that these charges are politically motivated and violate Venezuelan sovereignty. I mean, how is the United States then justifying jurisdiction of a former foreign leader? Does this case perhaps set a precedent for just how the United States may pursue other countries or former leaders accused of transnational crimes?
It's certainly a question that has been raised at the United Nations. The Secretary General talking about how this, takes us into uncharted territory, that this arrest is unprecedented. But we have seen similar instances in the past where the United States has exercised jurisdiction in foreign countries, brought leaders to the United States who have subsequently faced trial. But there are certainly many, many questions in terms of international law that are being raised here. The United States position that put forward by Secretary of State Marco Rubio is that this was a military action, basically supporting a legal action by the United States, a court action by the United States, a legal indictment of the Venezuelan president. So they are framing this as the implementation of a court sort of guaranteed indictment here. But there are even questions around the legality of that. What will certainly play itself out in the courtroom behind me is the ventilation of these very, very questions. This is something a judge is very likely going to have to grapple with at the early iterations of this trial. No less the diplomatic maneuverings that we are seeing at the United Nations. What does this mean for countries around the world that may fall foul of the United States, given the fact that the United States itself is asserting the fact that this is also about Venezuela's oil and the United States seeking redress for companies that had invested in the oil infrastructure in Venezuela, only then to be booted out of the country. In addition to that, the United States claims that Nicolas Maduro was not a legitimate president. It is widely reported that he did not win last year's July 2024 election. A UN panel of experts appointed by the Secretary General at the behest of the Venezuelan government found that that election was not free and fair, and that very likely did not meet the very basic tenets of what a free and fair election looks like. They even haven't published a tabulation of the results, which was part of electoral law in terms of every polling station in Venezuela having to do just that. So the view out there is that the opposition won those elections very handily, but they were not then respected by the incumbent Nicolas Maduro, who then clung to power. So in the United States position is that he was not a legitimate president to begin with, but that is certainly an argument for the legal experts.
Now, Sherwin, just in closing, in as much as Nicolas Maduro is in the spotlight, but I suppose the United Nations Security Council has been placed on that international pedestal because so many questions have been asked and raised about whether the United Nations Security Council debate tells us and what it tells us about the Council's relevance when a permanent member acts unilaterally. I mean, several states, as we've mentioned, focus less on Nicolas Maduro's leadership and more on Washington's actions. So does this signal growing discomfort with U.S. military exceptionalism?
Absolutely, but what can the United Nations Security Council that is charged with the maintenance of international peace and security really do about it? You saw the lack of its ability to arrest the situation in Gaza. You saw the lack of the UN Security Council's ability to stop Russia's invasion of Ukraine, given that Russia too enjoys the permanent status and the veto-wielding power to squash or thwart any action by this council. So as much as the council is seen as a forum to discuss and maintain international peace and security, it has merely become a theater for countries to put forward their various national positions, because the collective is unfortunately not able to act. So there are many questions about the international rules-based system. This is a United States that is sanctioning judges of the International Criminal Court, sanctioning the prosecutors that have indicted the Israeli Prime Minister and his former defense minister, sanctioning prosecutors that are investigating possible war crimes committed by US military forces in Afghanistan. So the United States and many other P5 countries, certainly by their actions, are undermining the international rules-based system. The question is, what do we do in the absence of a Security Council unable to fulfill its mandate? And that is an answer I do not have, a question I don't have the answer to quite yet.
All right, Sherwin, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. Well, that was SABC News correspondent in the United States, Sherwin Bryce-Peace, following developments in New York, where ousted Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores have pleaded not guilty to a range of serious federal charges, including narco-terrorism and cocaine trafficking.